The asteroid mining station's cargo bay had seen better decades, which was saying something since it had been built to withstand the economic collapse of 3 different galactic governments. Rust-colored stains decorated the corrugated metal walls like abstract art, though the stains probably weren't rust. In the center of this cheerfully decrepit space, 17 different species of mercenaries had arranged themselves in what they presumably thought was a threatening formation around one unremarkable human female. She yawned. "This is your professional assessment?" The Catherian commander's voice carried the particular brand of disdain that only came from having 4 vocal cords and a superiority complex. His scaled hide rippled with patterns that his species used to communicate contempt, though the human probably couldn't read them. One barely grown primate and her— what is that thing? The thing in question sat on its haunches beside the human, looking about as threatening as a houseplant. It resembled what ancient Earth databases might have called a cross between a large dog and a small bear, if someone had decided to upholster both animals in midnight black fur and give them disturbingly intelligent amber eyes. Currently, those eyes were tracking the movement of each mercenary with the lazy interest of someone watching a mildly entertaining soap opera. Local records indicate it's called a companion species, offered the Vrex intelligence specialist, her insectoid mandibles clicking nervously. Apparently, humans form emotional attachments to other creatures for psychological comfort. How charmingly primitive. The Catherian commander stepped closer to the human, who had settled herself cross-legged on a crate marked "Hazardous materials do not ingest" in 17 languages. "Tell me, little primate, do you understand your situation?" The human, who couldn't have been more than 20 standard years old and possessed all the imposing presence of a soggy biscuit, looked up from examining her fingernails. "Well, let's see. 17 different species, probably representing at least 4 different governments, all pointing various weapons at me in a carefully orchestrated display of overwhelming force. Over 97% of viewers here are watching without subscribing. Don't be one of them. Hit that subscribe button right now and join the journey. Every click helps us grow stronger, and you'll never miss the next epic story." She paused to study the hegemony battle suit standing to her left. "Though I have to ask, did someone actually pay you to bring the full exoskeleton setup? Because honestly, that seems like overkill for one unarmed human." The hegemony warrior's synthesized voice crackled through his suit's speakers. "Psychological intimidation protocols suggest maximum display of force increases compliance rates by 37%. Psychological intimidation protocols," the human repeated thoughtfully. "Right. And you got those statistics from where, exactly?" "Classified research databases maintained by the Andromedans, I'm guessing?" The human's tone remained conversationally pleasant. "The ones who've been selling intelligence, profiles on human military capabilities for the past 6 months? The same Andromedans who, fun fact, have never actually fought humans in any meaningful capacity." An uncomfortable silence settled over the cargo bay, like a blanket made of doubt and poor life choices. The Vrex specialist's mandibles clicked faster. "Our intelligence sources are thoroughly vetted." "I'm sure they are." The human reached over to scratch behind her companion's ears. The creature made a sound somewhere between a purr and a growl, though it seemed directed more at the mercenaries than at her. "It's just fascinating how everyone in this sector seems to have such definitive opinions about my species based on, what, tourist videos and diplomatic footage?" "Your species is well documented," the Catherian commander snapped, though his confidence patterns were flickering. "Emotionally unstable, technologically inferior, prone to irrational decision-making under stress. The perfect combination for easy exploitation." "Emotionally unstable." The human nodded, as if considering this. You know what's funny about that assessment? It assumes you understand human emotions in the first place. The Quellan mercenary, a species whose entire evolutionary history had been spent as apex predators, shifted uncomfortably. What is that supposed to mean? Well, take right now, for instance. The human gestured casually at the circle of armed hostiles surrounding her. You're all operating under the assumption that I'm afraid. That being outnumbered and outgunned should trigger some kind of panic response that makes me more compliant. That is the standard psychological response for most sentient species, the hegemony warrior stated with mechanical certainty. Most sentient species? Sure. The human's smile was the sort of expression that probably looked reassuring to other humans, but had an oddly unsettling effect on everyone else present. But here's the thing about humans. We have this weird relationship with fear. Sometimes it makes us freeze up, sometimes it makes us run away, and sometimes... She paused to yawn again, more elaborately this time. Sometimes it just makes us really, really curious about what happens next. The companion creature's growl deepened, though it still hadn't moved from its relaxed position. Several of the mercenaries took involuntary steps backward. Curious, the Catherian commander repeated slowly. Oh, absolutely. Like, right now I'm genuinely curious about your extraction plan. Did someone actually hire you to bring me back alive? Or was that more of a suggestion? Because your formation is optimized for intimidation, not transportation. And honestly, the weapons selection suggests you're more prepared for a siege than a kidnapping. The Vrek specialist's compound eyes swiveled to focus on her colleagues. The contract specifically stated live capture. Right, but look at your lineup here. You've got a Quellan hunter, apex predator, naturally. Aggressive, evolved to kill prey efficiently. You've got a hegemony battlesuit designed for frontline combat operations. You've got what appears to be a Zephyrian demolitions expert, unless I'm misreading those chemical burn scars. The human's gaze moved methodically around the circle. And a Catherian commander whose promotion history probably includes at least 3 successful genocide campaigns. The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to drop several degrees. Your point being? The Catherian's voice had acquired a dangerous edge. My point being that this looks less like a capture operation and more like a murder squad that someone told to keep the target breathing. Which raises some interesting questions about who hired you and what they actually want. The human companion stretched, a movement that somehow managed to display an impressive array of teeth and claws without appearing overtly threatening. The mercenaries' weapons tracked the movement instinctively. Easy there, folks. The human's voice carried a note of amusement. He's just stretching. Though I appreciate the reaction time. Very professional. What do you want? The Quellan hunter's natural predator instincts were clearly telling him something was wrong with this entire situation, even if his higher brain functions couldn't identify what. Me? Nothing particularly exciting. I'm just a military cadet on a routine training exercise. Though I have to admit, this whole setup is providing some fantastic field experience in xenopsychology and threat assessment. Training exercise? The Vrek specialist's mandibles had stopped clicking entirely, which was probably not a good sign. Oh yes, very educational. For instance, I'm learning that galactic intelligence networks have some serious gaps in their human behavioral profiles. Also that whoever hired you probably didn't mention that humans tend to volunteer for the missions that other species would consider suicide runs. The human's companion yawned, displaying teeth that were definitely not designed for processing plant matter. But don't let me interrupt your intimidation routine, the human continued cheerfully. I'm sure you've put a lot of effort into the choreography. The cargo bay fell silent, except for the distant hum of the asteroid station's life support systems, and the increasingly unsettled breathing of 17 different species who were beginning to suspect they had made a very expensive mistake. The Catherian commander decided to reassert control through the time-honored tradition of asking stupid questions. What intelligence value could you possibly possess? You're a first-year cadet from a backwater system. Third year, actually, but I appreciate the demotion. The human pulled a ration bar from her uniform pocket and began unwrapping it with the casual efficiency of someone who had clearly done this thousands of times. And you're right about the intelligence value. I mean, what could I possibly know about human military doctrine, defensive capabilities, or our delightfully creative approaches to problem-solving? She offered half the ration bar to her companion, who accepted it with the polite dignity of someone who was definitely not impressed by present company. Human military doctrine is extensively documented, the hegemony warrior announced. Primitive projectile weapons, basic energy shields, limited faster-than-light capability. Your species lacks the technological sophistication for meaningful resistance. Documented by whom? The human took a bite of what appeared to be compressed protein and artificial flavoring. Let me guess. Observation of our merchant marine vessels? Analysis of our civilian shipping? Maybe some intercepted communications from our agricultural colonies? The Vrex specialist's silence was more telling than any admission. Thought so. The human chewed contemplatively. You know, there's this thing humans do called compartmentalization. Basically, we don't send our military secrets along with our grain shipments. Revolutionary concept, I know. Your defensive installations have been thoroughly surveyed, the Quellan hunter interjected, though his confidence was beginning to sound strained. Which installations would those be? The orbital platforms around our trade worlds? The sensor arrays protecting our mining operations? The human's tone remained infuriatingly conversational. Because those aren't defensive installations exactly. Those are more like polite suggestions. The Zephyrian demolitions expert spoke for the first time, her voice carrying the distinctive harmonic quality of her species. Polite suggestions? Well, think about it from a strategic perspective. If someone wants to attack your shipping lanes or mining operations, you put up enough defenses to make them think twice, but not enough to make them think you're hiding something valuable. The real defensive installations are somewhere else entirely. Several of the mercenaries exchanged glances that conveyed roughly the same message across multiple species. This was not going according to plan. Where else? The Catherian commander's scales were now displaying patterns that his species associated with confusion and mounting anger. Oh, I couldn't possibly tell you that. Military secrets and all. The human finished her ration bar and dusted off her hands. But I will say this. Human defensive strategy tends to be based on what we call defense in depth. Layers within layers within layers. It's a concept we borrowed from some of our more successful historical conflicts. Historical conflicts? The Vrex specialist's compound eyes betrayed her curiosity despite her better judgment. Sure, take the Battle of Stalingrad, for instance, or the Siege of Malta, or pretty much any time someone tried to conquer Afghanistan. The human smile took on a distinctly unpleasant quality. Humans have this fascinating relationship with asymmetrical warfare. We're really good at making victory cost more than defeat. The cargo bay's lighting fixtures hummed overhead, casting shifting shadows that seemed to emphasize the growing unease among the assembled mercenaries. Those are primitive conflicts, the hegemony warrior stated, though his synthesized voice lacked its earlier certainty. Pre-spaceflight civilizations engaging in surface-based territorial disputes. Primitive, maybe, but the principles scale up beautifully. The human began counting on her fingers. Make the enemy fight for every inch. Make them commit resources they can't afford to lose. Make victory look possible right up until the moment it becomes impossible. And most importantly, make sure they never really understand what they're fighting against until it's too late to withdraw gracefully. Her companion stretched again, this time revealing muscles that suggested a diet considerably more varied than the peaceful herbivore most of the mercenaries had initially assumed. "You're attempting psychological manipulation," the Quellan hunter observed, though he sounded like he was trying to convince himself. "Am I? Or am I just making conversation while we wait for whatever comes next?" The human shrugged. "Though, since we're on the topic of psychology, I have to ask, how much do you actually know about human bonding behaviors?" "Emotional attachment to family units and reproductive partners," the Vrek specialist recited promptly. "Typical mammalian social structures." "Right, but you're missing the really interesting part. Humans don't just bond with other humans. We bond with pretty much everything. Other species, inanimate objects, abstract concepts, ideological frameworks." The human reached over to scratch her companion's chin, prompting a sound that was definitely more growl than purr. "We'll form pack loyalties with creatures we've never seen before, fight to the death for principles we can't properly define, and commit genocide in the name of protecting people we've never met." The temperature in the cargo bay seemed to be dropping again, though the life support systems showed no malfunction. "Genocide is hardly unique to your species," the Cytherian commander pointed out. "No, but our reasons tend to be unusual. Most species commit genocide for resources, territory, or genetic competition. Humans commit genocide because someone threatened our pets, or because we decided that some abstract principle was worth more than entire civilizations, or because we got bored and needed something to do." The Zephyrian demolitions expert's harmonic voice carried a note of skepticism. "That cannot be historically accurate. World War II started partially because humans decided that some other humans weren't human enough. The Crusades, multiple centuries of warfare over who had the correct interpretation of religious texts. The Punic Wars, Rome decided that Carthage existing was personally offensive and needed to be corrected permanently. The human's academic tone made the example sound like she was discussing weather patterns. And those were just the conflicts involving one planet. We're much more creative now that we have interstellar travel. Several of the mercenaries were now actively backing away from the human, though they probably weren't consciously aware of it. "Your species' historical violence is irrelevant to current military capabilities," the hegemony warrior insisted, though his battlesuit's threat assessment systems were clearly running continuous scans of both the human and her companion. "Is it, though? Because human military doctrine is based entirely on historical precedent. Every tactical manual, every strategic framework, every operational procedure, all of it derived from conflicts that taught us very specific lessons about what works and what doesn't. The human's companion had stopped making any sound at all, which somehow seemed more ominous than the growling. And what lessons would those be?" The Cytherian commander's question sounded like he immediately regretted asking. "That war is about making the other guy quit. Everything else, technology, resources, numerical superiority, all of that is just context. The side that's willing to keep fighting when the other side wants to stop is the side that wins." The human's expression hadn't changed, but something in her voice suggested that the conversation was approaching more serious territory. And humans, as a species, have some very interesting ideas about when it's appropriate to stop fighting. The Quellan hunter's predator instincts finally overrode his professional discipline. "Enough philosophy. We have a schedule to maintain." He moved with the fluid grace that had made his species the apex predators of 6 different worlds, closing the distance to the human in less than a heartbeat. His claws extended, designed to paralyze rather than kill, aimed for the nerve clusters that would render her unconscious without permanent damage. The human didn't move. Her companion did. What happened next violated several established principles of physics, biology, and common sense. The creature that had been sitting peacefully beside the human transformed into something that redefined the word violence in 4 different languages simultaneously. It didn't grow larger, it simply became more concentrated, as if someone had taken the concept of dangerous and compressed it into a form that could fit in the cargo bay. The Quellan hunter's claws met what felt like hitting a mountain that had learned how to bite back. The creature's jaws closed around his forearm with a sound like breaking bones, though the breaking bones belonged to someone else entirely. The hunter's scream harmonized beautifully with the distinctive crack of exoskeleton giving way under pressure. "Easy," the human said mildly. "We talked about this." The creature released the Quellan's arm and sat back down, licking, its lips with the satisfied expression of someone who had been very well behaved under trying circumstances. The hunter collapsed, clutching his mangled limb and making sounds that probably constituted swearing in his native language. "Medical kits in the emergency locker," the human mentioned helpfully. "Third panel from the left. The blue cross symbol is apparently universal." The remaining 16 mercenaries discovered that pointing weapons at someone became significantly more complicated when you weren't entirely sure what you were supposed to be shooting at. "What is that thing?" The Vrex specialist's voice had climbed several octaves. "Taxonomically speaking, Terran designation is Canis domesticus, subspecies militaris. Common name varies depending on which human military unit you ask, but war dog covers the basics." The human reached over to pat her companion, who accepted the attention with the dignity of someone who had just made an important point about personal boundaries. Though dog doesn't really capture the full scope of the breeding program. Breeding program? The Catherian commander's scales were now cycling through colors that didn't exist in his species' normal emotional spectrum. 12,000 years of selective breeding for intelligence, loyalty, aggression, and tactical adaptability. Started with wolves, added genetic material from about 40 other Terran species, then spent the last 3 centuries incorporating some truly creative biotechnology. The human's tone suggested she was discussing her favorite hobby. The military versions are designed to operate independently in hostile environments, adapt their hunting strategies to unknown prey species, and maintain pack loyalty under extreme stress conditions. The war dog yawned, revealing teeth that had definitely not been included in anyone's threat assessment briefings. "It's been modified," the hegemony warrior stated, his battlesuit's sensors obviously detecting something that disturbed them. "Obviously, though modified implies we started with something normal and changed it. This particular line was designed from genetic base pairs up to be the perfect human military companion." The human began counting on her fingers again. Enhanced strength, improved reaction times, toxin resistance, vacuum adaptation, and a cognitive suite that includes tactical analysis, threat assessment, and autonomous decision-making. Several of the mercenaries were now backing toward the cargo bay exits, though they were apparently too professional to actually run. "Autonomous decision-making," the Zephyrian demolitions expert repeated slowly. "Right. He's not just following commands or operating on instinct. He's evaluating the tactical situation, identifying optimal targets, and making strategic choices about when to engage." The human smiled at her companion, who was now studying the assembled mercenaries with what could only be described as scientific interest. "For instance, right now he's calculating how many of you he could neutralize before you could coordinate an effective response." The war dog's head tilted slightly, as if considering a particularly interesting mathematical problem. How many? The question came from multiple sources simultaneously. Well, let's see. 17 targets, mixed species, various armor configurations, multiple weapon types. The human appeared to be working through the calculation herself. Accounting for the confined space, available cover, and the fact that most of you are now positioned disadvantageously for mutual support. Probably all of you, if he decided you represented a genuine threat to me. The cargo bay's lighting seemed to dim, though that was probably just everyone's imagination. But that would be wasteful, the human continued conversationally. Much more efficient to neutralize key targets and let the rest of you reconsider your career choices. Take out your command structure, disable your heavy weapons, eliminate anyone with demonstrated hostile intent, and see if the survivors want to negotiate. The Catherian commander's voice carried a note of desperate authority. We are 17 armed professionals. Your animal, regardless of modifications, is still just one creature. One creature, sure, but you're making some assumptions about the tactical situation that might be worth reconsidering. The human reached into another uniform pocket and pulled out what appeared to be a small communications device. For instance, you're assuming this is a capture operation when it might actually be field testing for new anti-personnel systems. She pressed a button on the device. Nothing visible happened, but the war dog's ears perked up, and his tail began wagging in a manner that somehow managed to seem deeply threatening. Field testing, the Vrex specialist whispered. Standard protocol for evaluating military hardware against realistic target parameters. You volunteers provided an excellent cross-section of galactic military capabilities. Different armor types, weapon systems, tactical doctrines, biological vulnerabilities. The human checked something on her communication device. The data collection has been quite comprehensive. Data collection? The Hegemony Warrior's battlesuit was now running full defensive scans, though they apparently weren't providing much comfort. Behavioral analysis, response times, tactical coordination, stress reactions under unexpected circumstances. Very valuable information for future operational planning. The human pocketed the device. Though I have to say, the results have been somewhat disappointing. Most galactic militaries seem to rely heavily on intimidation and overwhelming force, but show significant weaknesses when facing adaptive opposition. The war dog stood up and stretched, displaying a physique that suggested regular exercise and a high-protein diet. Adaptive opposition, the Quellan hunter managed through gritted teeth, still cradling his injured arm. Opponents who don't react predictably to standard tactical approaches, who treat disadvantageous odds as interesting problems rather than cause for surrender, who view being outnumbered as an opportunity to field test new solutions. The human smile had acquired a distinctly predatory quality. Humans excel at adaptive opposition. It's practically our species' defining characteristic. The war dog began walking slowly around the perimeter of the cargo bay, apparently inspecting each mercenary with the professional interest of a quality control specialist. We could kill you both, the Catherian commander stated, though his conviction was notably absent. You could try, the human agreed cheerfully, though that might complicate your exit strategy. This station has some very sophisticated automated security systems, and they've been programmed with some fairly specific instructions about unauthorized weapons discharge in pressurized compartments. As if summoned by her words, red warning lights began blinking along the cargo bay walls, accompanied by a recorded announcement in 17 different languages, advising everyone to please remain calm and await security personnel. Security personnel, the human explained, being a relative term in this context. The cargo bay doors slid open with the cheerful efficiency of machinery that had been maintained by people who actually cared about their jobs. What entered wasn't security personnel in any conventional sense, but rather a collection of humans in various states of military dress who moved with the casual competence of professionals who had done this particular job many times before. Status report, cadet? The apparent leader was an older human female whose uniform bore insignia that none of the aliens recognized but somehow conveyed authority anyway. 17 test subjects, mixed species composition, standard mercenary psychological profiles, primary objectives achieved, secondary data collection ongoing. The cadet's tone shifted to something more formal, without losing its underlying amusement. One minor injury to the Quellan hunter, self-inflicted through poor tactical judgment. The war dog padded over to greet the newcomers, receiving the sort of casual attention that suggested this was routine rather than remarkable. Excellent work. And the intelligence assessment? Confirmed hypothesis regarding galactic underestimation of human capabilities. Also confirmed secondary hypothesis regarding over-reliance on intimidation tactics versus adaptive response protocols. The cadet stood and brushed dust off her uniform. The test subjects demonstrated typical patterns of assumption-based planning and inadequate contingency preparation. The Catherian commander's scales were now displaying colors that didn't exist in standard xenobiological databases. Test subjects? The mining station is a training facility, the senior human explained with the patience of someone addressing particularly slow students. We've been running tactical exercises here for the past 18 months, evaluating different approaches to asymmetric warfare scenarios. You mean this entire asteroid? The Virex specialist's mandibles had locked in position. Is owned and operated by human military intelligence? Yes. The mining operation is functional, but secondary to our primary mission, which involves understanding how other species approach what they perceive as advantageous tactical situations. The assembled mercenaries exchanged looks that conveyed a universal concept that roughly translated as, "We are completely screwed." The contract, one of the Zephyrian demolitions expert began, was placed through a series of intermediaries by our Psychological Operations Division, standard recruitment protocols for gathering test subjects with diverse skill sets and species backgrounds. The senior human consulted a handheld device. Payment will be processed according to the agreed terms, minus medical expenses for the Quellan hunter and a modest deduction for property damage. Property damage? The hegemony warrior's battlesuit was apparently still cataloging threats that it couldn't properly categorize. Scuff marks on the deck plating, minor scoring on bulkhead surfaces from weapons targeting, psychological trauma to station personnel who had to listen to all the dramatic speeches. The senior human's tone suggested this was routine paperwork rather than anything serious. Nothing that won't buff out. The war dog had settled beside one of the newcomers, accepting ear scratches with the dignified pleasure of someone who had earned them through professional excellence. Our intelligence regarding human military capabilities, the Catherian commander started, is approximately 15% accurate for civilian populations and essentially fictional for military assets, the cadet interrupted, which was the point of the exercise. Understanding how galactic intelligence networks develop their threat assessments helps us calibrate our operational security measures. Operational security, the Quellan hunter repeated through pain medication that someone had thoughtfully provided. The art of making sure potential adversaries don't understand what they're dealing with until it's strategically advantageous for them to find out. The senior human smiled with the sort of expression that probably looked reassuring to other humans, but had the opposite effect on everyone else. Humans have been practicing operational security since before we discovered fire. We're quite good at it. One of the other humans began collecting equipment that had apparently been scattered around the cargo bay for authenticity purposes. Duration of operational scenario was within acceptable parameters. test subjects maintained engagement throughout all phases despite mounting evidence of tactical disadvantage. Mounting evidence, the Zephyrian demolitions expert said slowly. The cadets' casual attitude, the war dogs' behavioral patterns, the inconsistencies in the station's supposed security measures, the convenient availability of medical supplies. The senior human began counting on her fingers. Any one of those factors should have suggested that the situation wasn't what it appeared to be. But galactic military doctrine emphasizes commitment to operational objectives regardless of changing tactical circumstances, the cadet added helpfully, which makes it very difficult for most species to recognize when they've been maneuvered into untenable positions. The war dog yawned again, though this time it seemed more like genuine tiredness than a threat display. The broader strategic implications, the Catherian commander attempted, are that human military planning operates on significantly longer timescales than most galactic civilizations anticipate. This particular exercise has been running for 18 months. The psychological profiles we've been developing extend back nearly 3 years. The operational framework we're testing is part of a strategic assessment program that began approximately 7 years ago. Several of the mercenaries sat down heavily on available cargo containers, apparently experiencing what humans would have recognized as existential fatigue. 7 years, the Virex specialist whispered. Strategic planning for potential conflicts that may or may not occur within the next several decades. Humans prefer to understand possible opponents long before we have any reason to fight them. The senior human's tone remained conversational, as if she were discussing crop rotation schedules. It's much more efficient than scrambling to gather intelligence after hostilities have commenced. The cadet collected her war dog's leash from where she had apparently left it, draped over a piece of mining equipment. Though I should mention that this exercise has been quite valuable for all participants. You've provided excellent data on standard galactic military responses, and hopefully you've gained some useful insights into human operational methodologies. Useful insights, the hegemony warrior repeated. Such as the importance of questioning initial assumptions, the value of understanding your opponent's psychological framework, and the advisability of thoroughly researching any military contracts that seem unusually straightforward. The cadet attached the leash to her war dog's collar, though the creature clearly didn't require physical restraint. All of which should serve you well in future professional endeavors. The senior human consulted her handheld device again. Transport arrangements have been made for your return to previous locations. Departure schedules are available at the station's information kiosks, along with documentation of your participation in this exercise for professional reference purposes. Professional reference purposes. The Quellen hunter was apparently recovered enough to ask questions, though he was still cradling his bandaged arm. Letters of recommendation emphasizing your willingness to engage with challenging tactical scenarios and your professional conduct under unexpected circumstances. The cadet smiled with what appeared to be genuine warmth. Human military recruiters value those qualities quite highly. As the humans began filing out of the cargo bay with the casual efficiency of people heading home after a successful day at work, the assembled mercenaries found themselves alone with the growing realization that they had been comprehensively outmaneuvered by a species they had dismissed as primitive and predictable. The war dog paused at the doorway to look back at them, with what could only be described as amusement, as if it had enjoyed the social interaction and hoped they might do it again sometime. Then it trotted off after its human, leaving 17 different species to contemplate the uncomfortable possibility that everything they thought they knew about strategic thinking might need significant revision. Outside the cargo bay, the mining station continued its normal operations with the mechanical contentment of machinery that had work to do and plenty of time to do it properly.